And from Johnny Depp and Matt Paternostra, do you think Canada needs a dual nationality scouting department, since in Jesse's previous comment, he made a comment that he wasn't aware of Kulinovic, and he scored a brace against Ajax and was called up to Bosnia. With Baron Oluwaseyi not in form and not producing for Canada, was it not the right time to call up either Promise David or Kulinovic? I do think that Jesse Marsch has a good handle on the players that are eligible for Canada that are scoring goals. Maybe there's some players that are borderline eligible, but if they are eligible and they're scoring goals and they're in good form, I would imagine that he knows about them if, folks in the Twitter comments know about them.
I was going to say, someone told me recently, they're like, do you think Jesse Marsch is not aware of Luka Kulinovic? And this, there's people close to the situation. So what I'd say on that, he definitely was aware of Kulinovic. What I'm most curious about is the reasons. And I guess if we're going to sit back and speculate, probably the biggest one that stands out is age. Because Kulinovic he's a 99 born, so he's 25 now, right entering his prime of his career. We have to remember a lot of the other striking options. Okay, Bear, I think, is a 99, so he's the same age. Tani Oluwaseyi is a year younger. He's a 2000. But the few that I think what Marsch is targeting is the longer term, because I think what we have to remember now, with David being in form, he's not going anywhere. Larin is still at an age where maybe we're seeing some of the last years of him at this top level in a national team shirt, and maybe a Kulinovic, yes, right now could slot in ahead of a Bear, Oluwaseyi, all these names, but looking long term, Jason Russell, I think, is 4 years younger than Kulinovic. You look at some of the other names, like if a Daniel Jebison were ever get called in, he's still got a long ways to go. He's been struggling for Watford, but he's like an 03 as well. He's 4 years younger. Promise David is probably the biggest one to look at, because I think he's an 02 or an 03. So he's as well like multiple years younger than Promise David. My bet is what Marsch is doing is, yes, okay, he understands losing a Kulinovic short term. Yeah, it could help to have the depth, but I think long term he's banking on the fact that between one of those guys, two of those guys, long term they will make Canada not regret getting Kulinovic. So while it sucks to lose him because you want to get every dual national, look, he's going to go play for Bosnia. It's a great opportunity for him. You can't forget that in the whole aspect of things. And Marsch is not doing maybe what in England would have done and just called him up just to call him up, and then he ends up rotting the bench in years to come. But now we'll have to see if his bet pays off. But I think with Promise David, he's the one to watch. His form lately has been very, very good for Union Saint-Gilloise.
Yeah, he has been very good. It's too bad that there's not enough coverage of that Belgian league, because I would have loved to get a real Promise David story up on Canadian Soccer Daily with some accessible highlights, but that's not the case with the internet. So be it. Complain another day. It feels like this obsession with dual nationals, because of the level that Canada have hit now in the last couple of years, go back to even qualifying for the World Cup. I'm getting tired of it. I'm getting tired that we're always talking about looking for the next guy. This guy's got a multiple passport. This has existed since Owen Hargreaves decided to play for England. However, I do think as a footballing nation, as a program, you will get to the point where we don't need to obsess about these guys who may be eligible at 25 years old, because we will know them at 17 and 16, and they'll have been in the programs, and they'll have had youth camps. That's what I want to get to. I really want to see the Canadian national program get to that point where we're not talking about 25-year-old find-me's to come and help save us beat Suriname or whatever. You know what I mean? I think about how cyclical the dual national conversation has been with the United States program, for example. When Klinsmann was there, all of a sudden there was all these half German guys that ended up in the team. You will always have an American base with Mexican heritage that might be have their heads turned by El Tri, but that seems kind of natural to the way the population is going in the U.S., and that will stick around for a while. But for us, I'd really like to know these guys in advance and not get so obsessed every time a new window comes around about someone eligible. It should be more of an anomaly than a regular thing. We could field a dual national 11 of guys that have less than 10 caps, right? I'd love to get to the point where we're not able to do that anymore.
Well,
I think the program was at a point where dual nationals were very important. You look at the Ishmael Kones. At one point, it looked like Ike Ugbo might have been that player. Estacio I remember, when he committed to the national team, that was a big one. And those players have all grown into, very important players in the national team. But when you look at when those players came in, and Kone, of course, a little bit more recently ahead of the World Cup, they've all developed into very important players. Whereas I think when you're looking at the dual nationals now, the team has gotten to such a better level that these dual nationals that we're talking about are not the ones that are going to step in and make that instant impact on a rarity. Promise David, a dual national, he could probably step in and make an instant impact. But when we're looking at a Kulinovic, when we're looking at, some of the other players that Canada missed out on, I don't think they're necessarily, the Estaquios and Kones of the world that Canada is going to really, really miss out on. Especially, Alex, you mentioned Kulinovic's age. He's a 99. You and I are 2000. We're veterans and old and washed up by this point. And so I don't know what that makes Brendan. But,
wow, that's crazy.
I don't. I don't think that necessarily benefits the national team.
Yeah, thanks very much. A 27-year-old guy on the men's league hockey team last night. I finally made my season debut. He was talking about, oh man, I'm nearly 30. I'm like, bro, I'm closer to 40 than you are 30. You're 27. And he goes, really? Wow, man, you look great for 38. Thank you very much, you 27-year-old. So I'm not I'm NFP dad, but I'm not super old here, man.
Definitely not washed. Still got it.
Thank you.
I've played with Queens Park Rangers. You're definitely not washed.
Yeah, in a final tonight, by the way, I'm going to go and support. I haven't played all season, so I'm just going to go and I'm going to bring the champagne for the parking lot.
Can't be honest.
Minus 2-degree weather.
Can't be honest.
So hopefully the next edition of the show, that's what I'm talking about. But super quick finish to your point, Alex, Ben, about Kone and Estaquio. And yes, those guys were hugely important, and they didn't have the youth experience that I'm talking about. However, both of those guys made their caps for Canada before they were able to drink in the States. Kone wasn't even able to drink outside of Quebec. So, to me, that's still in the window in which you want to catch those guys. We live in a global society. I am not a dual citizen, but I'm a dual national. If I was athletic, I could play for Portugal. But this is just the way our population is, that you will always have that eligibility, I think. You're not going to escape that. I'm not talking about how you got to be pure and have 8 generations of Canadian heritage. I'm not at all talking about that. I just think that it'd be great to get to a point where we see all of these guys who have this eligibility come through in the youth system and have an impact at the program before they have senior caps.
Well, I'd say, to wrap it all up, I think what we want from Canada is we want them to be at a point where you don't need dual nationals, but they're a nice bonus, right? And I think that's still where you feel that with like a Kulinovic. Look, that's why I'd say, don't get me wrong. It would be great to have him. You can never have too much depth. You're always one injury away from needing a guy like a Kulinovic, right? Even if he's not in that setup, of course, you don't want to bet on that stuff, but also you want to be at a point where you're not sitting there and being like, the future of our program depends on it. And, Canada's been through that, like getting Davies. Remember, there was a point where you wonder, would Davies play for Canada or not? He ends up committing. Jonathan David could have very well played for, a couple other nations, Stefano Estaquio. Canada's at a point now where they've got enough of the culture carriers where a lot of it's bonus, and now that you can feels like guys coming in are going to fall into their laps, which is almost a nicer feeling than being like, man, the future of this team depends on this. And I think it's nice that Canada's slowly getting to that point, although there are still some positions. I'm sure if Kulinovic was a center back, we'd be having different discussions now, but that's also just the name of the game, right?